A few days ago, Hoyo released a dev note regarding the issue players had with the version 3.0 story, so let's see what they have to say for themselves. So at first they want to talk about the story. Okay, I think the amount of the lore is already pretty good. They even put the lore in the Vortex of Genesis where you can just read about the Titans, and they've even put the lore of each heroes in Mem's book instead of putting it in the dialogues. I think the main issue with the story is its length. I have some guesses about it. One of my guesses is that it could be because they wanted to introduce us about the New Remembrance path for the MC Reich in the first patch. Because if you take a look at the other paths, they usually introduce these paths near or during the climax of the story, but that's not the case with Remembrance. And we heard from the live stream that the developers wanted to make this version main story like 8 patches long. Therefore, giving us the new path earlier would be better than, making us wait for 6 patches later. Now, for the story itself, I actually enjoy the story. I don't think it has too much reading, not in the context of explaining something at least. The dialogues are pretty heavy, no unnecessary long yap like Germany Dove. Some parts do feel like a side story, even though they hold a pretty good lore drop like Damiani's part or Aglaya's trial. I think they could have made them blend better with the main storyline instead of making them feel like it's sidetracking us. And I would say that the story feels like 2 parts merged together, like the introduction to Amphoreus is part 1 and part 2 is the battle to Nigador. They could have ended at the Vortex of Genesis where Aglaia is about to execute us, but I guess that wouldn't be interesting cause there wouldn't be too much tension to the story and it would be just a boring introduction. Onto the second part of the note, they say they wanted to make the dialogue shorter and in a relaxed manner. Okay, so they're going to give us an option to skip the dialogue option and go straight to the next part of the story. An example for this case is the dialogue option in the Abyss of Fate where we first met 3B and Finon. So I assume this is where we ask Finon 5 questions before departing. I have to say this part of the dialogue actually answered very shortly by Finon, which is already good. But I think what could have been better is they give us a cutscene of us riding with the Dromas with Finon, and then he tells us about Amphoreus, and then it cuts off to a different style of cutscene, and after that black screen with the title like After the Journey, Fate Transition to the next cutscene where we arrive at Okema. I don't know, I think they could have made a longer cutscene in some moments in the story. And they give us an option to skip all the dialogue option, which I think is good, but it's a very small cut to the story, like it really doesn't affect the story that much. The next is, oh yeah, this part. This part actually feels like it's a forced comedy. I think for this part they should have just given us one chance to choose an option instead of making us to choose every option one at a time, then proceed to the next dialogue. Oh yeah, the black screen. A lot of people have been mentioning this. I don't exactly know how they'll fix this part. Some of the black screen were just to represent the character's movement, like in March's room with Black Swan, but some other black screen that they put in the game were also just to explain other things like time passed by, after the journey, yada yada yada. Personally, I don't think this problem bothers me that much when I play the story, cause since I'm a lore guy, I'm too focused on reading the dialogue that I don't even bat an eye to these small details like character's movement. However, if they added more movement to the characters during dialogues, that would add more expression to the characters and deepen the player's immersion in the story, which is really good. So this is before we travel back to the present to fight Nigador. Complete the mission in more Kremlin fashion. I'm guessing they will change the puzzle in this part into like straight up fighting. I don't think it's necessary to cut the puzzle in this part because during this part they explain to us how exactly the Kremlin betrayed their Titan. So if we go straight up just talking to Neas, it would be very weird to suddenly just teleport back to the present and we have no explanation of why the Titans is immortal. Now this is actually very good. For context, this part of the story is where we sign up for the Kremnos festival, a fighting festival. So we go in, we were welcomed with puzzles as if we're Kratos solving puzzle in God of War. I think cutting the puzzle in this part is good, just give us the fighting, then proceed to the next area. Have dialogue about Kremlin's betrayal, then proceed to the puzzles in the statue room. We will optimize the complex map pathing for main storyline exploration. Now this is good because one of the things that made the story so long is the map and the puzzle combined. Putting puzzles along the way is one thing, but giving us a path that led to puzzles to another one is frustrating. Like they could have just give us 1 or 2 puzzles then let us proceed to the next area. And the puzzle itself took a lot of time to finish, like the time book thingy and the giant hand. And of course the map itself is also a very long walk to go through. Like I get that it's our first time exploring the ruins, but they could have just shortened our way through, like maybe make a hole to make a shortcut or something. So the next is about people complain about the amount of enemy around the area. I don't think this part is necessary, it's just y'all are some skill issue motherfucker. Having a lot of mobs in those areas is understandable because we go into the temple and ruins of Nikedor. And they brought up the meta problem. I don't know how exactly they're going to bring back the old units to the current meta. Maybe make new characters that could bring them up, or maybe make the battlefield in favor for them. But there's no way they'll rework a lot of the old characters. They have 7 patch story to deal with. And not to mention Fate collab will happen around between July and September, which I don't know how they'll manage the collab in the middle of Amphoreus story, but what I know is they're gonna be very busy this year. Okay, so not all of it are mentioned here. Let's talk about the cutscene. I think they added a lot more cutscene in this patch. Well, of course, because it's a long ass story, so of course they would make more cutscene, even though some of it are very short, and I think they improved the quality of the cutscenes. They put a lot more cutscene in the first part of the story, but during the battle to Nikedor, it decreased significantly towards the end. I think some moments in the game could be made into a cutscene, like for example, the fight between Mighty and Nikedor, which would have been awesome to see. Also, I think there are 3 types of cutscene I wish they would bring to HSR. First one is the old 2D animated cutscene like in Plang-Plang. I think this style of cutscene could fill the blank in the story, like the black screen and stuff. And for some reason they stopped doing this style of cutscene. Second is this animation cutscene like in Genshin. Well, they did make a similar one, but they used it for trailer videos like this Amphoreus trailer. I think they could use this style of cutscene when like a character is telling a story. For example, let's say if Aglaya is telling us a story about how each Chrysos heirs obtain their powers. At first we would enter the usual CG cutscene, then a transition happened when Aglaya's golden string started to make these images of like the animation cutscene. Compared to Honkai Impact 3rd, who doesn't really have that much cutscene, I think they improved a lot of the quality of cutscenes in HSR, and they made a lot of them in between dialogues. Now I know what you're thinking, comparing a 2016 game to a 2022 game doesn't seem fair, but hear me out. Despite the improvement of their cutscenes quality, they seem to have like lost something. I don't know how exactly they spend their budget, but I also wish they would do cinematic cutscene like in Honkai Impact 3rd with songs, you know, like Regression or Final Lesson. But they rather spend it on characters trailer and made like 3 videos just to promote their new characters. And of course the trailers also hold some good lore in it like Acrons and Fireflies, but I would prefer if they included these kinds of videos in the game, instead of just posting it on YouTube. Other problem they also didn't talk about is the amount of stalling. As I mentioned before, the Damionis part and Aglaya's trial were like a side story, which I think can be counted as stalling, despite holding important lore. Other moments in the story that I can count as stalling are the walkbacks. It's a moment where they could have just skipped it instead of making us walk or teleport. I know it doesn't take long to teleport, but still it could save us a bunch of times. For example, after we left Mighty to return to Okema, we returned to Aglaya, but we had to teleport back then go walk to Aglaya. This pause between 2 dialogues in 2 places could have been just skipped. I mean, they did it in 2.7, even though it's a black screen, at least it's about a transition from one place to another. So I don't know why they didn't do it in 3.0. Because a lot of moments like this happen in the story. For example, there's this one moment where Tribi asks us to go meet Aglaya, and when she walked us to Aglaya, there's this sudden dialogue pause in the middle of the walking, Tribi talking to us about how Oronix's power works. I mean, they could have explained this part when we first thought by Tribi in the market. Or even better, just don't make us walk to Aglaya if you're gonna put a dialogue in between the walking. So yeah, this part was so unnecessary. Another stalling also happened right at the start of the story where we're voting our next destination. Now this is useless because here's the thing, in Penacony's story we were offered to go to Amphoreus by Black Swan, but then in 2.7 the story didn't really talk about where we're deciding to go. And in 3.0 we're voting? I thought we already decided to go to Amphoreus. So in summary, the story is good but the storytelling is still flatlining. All they have to do is cut the story shorter, maybe make it around like 4 to 5 hours long at most. Although it might undermine how strong the enemies we're gonna face like the Titans, at least it won't wear out those who wanted to finish the story early. I mean, they intend to make this story 8 patches long. I'm sure they know how to show that we can defeat 6 Titans and the secret enemy in such time. They also should make the black screens into a more dedicated character movements and keep the black screens that are necessary for transitions. And make the POV mode more relevant or aligned to the main storyline like what they did in Penacony, instead of just using it as a character trial. Make the CG cutscenes longer and bring back the 2D animated cutscene style, maybe to fill or change some part in the story. And even better, maybe they should bring the cinematic cutscene to the game. So yeah, that's all they needed to do and they should be fine. I mean, if they're really going to do it. But if they don't, then yeah.